On the edge of the small town, where dusty roads curved into the highway and life moved with the slow rhythm of clinking teacups and sizzling frying pans, there stood a modest roadside cafe with chipped wooden tables, a cracked neon sign that still hummed at night, and the smell of strong tea, fried bread, and nostalgia floating in the air. The kind of place where truck drivers stopped for a meal, students laughed away their worries, and strangers became friends over steaming cups of chai. And in that cafe, on one particular evening when the sky was turning crimson and the shadows grew long, sat a young girl named Aisha, barely 19, fragile but radiant in her quiet dignity, a girl with a thin frame, hair tied in a messy bun, and eyes that carried both pain and resilience, for she was not like others her age. Her right leg bore the brace of disability after an accident years ago, a cruel twist of fate that left her limping but never broke her spirit. Yet life had been harsh, and though her heart was strong, the stares, the whispers, and the casual cruelty of society were wounds deeper than the accident itself. And that night, while she sat alone at the corner table sketching flowers in her worn notebook, sipping lukewarm tea and occasionally glancing at the world outside, 3 boys barged into the cafe, laughing loudly, their careless arrogance filling the room like smoke. Boys who thrived on making others feel small, boys who mistook cruelty for confidence, and their eyes fell on Aisha, not with kindness but with that mocking curiosity bullies often carry, as if searching for their next victim. And while the cafe owner, an old man with a white beard, frowned quietly, he said nothing, perhaps too used to such moments. And as they approached Aisha's table, their laughter grew harsher, their words sharpened with malice, calling her names, imitating her limp, mocking her drawing. And though she tried to keep her head down, hoping silence would shield her, it didn't, for cruelty does not always walk away when ignored. Sometimes it hungers for more. And suddenly, in a moment that silenced the clinking cups and froze the chatter, one of the boys slapped her across the face. A slap that echoed louder than the clatter of dishes, a slap that carried with it the weight of humiliation, and though her eyes welled with tears, she did not cry out. She simply sat still, one hand holding her cheek, her sketchbook sliding from the table to the floor, her trembling fingers unable to pick it up, and the cafe grew tense. People whispering but not daring to intervene, fear and cowardice keeping them glued to their seats, because such boys often belonged to powerful families, and no one wanted to risk trouble. But in that heavy silence, while Aisha's world blurred between pain and shame, a sound rose from the distance, faint at first but growing louder. The thunder of engines, the unmistakable roar of motorcycles approaching, their growl vibrating through the ground. And within minutes the cafe windows flickered with shadows as 5 bikers rolled in, their jackets worn, their boots dusty, their presence commanding. And as they parked in unison, the cafe's air shifted, anticipation replacing fear, the room holding its breath, because these were not ordinary men. These were riders known in the town for their brotherhood, their loyalty, and their reputation of protecting those who could not protect themselves. And when they stepped inside, helmets under their arms, the cafe seemed to shrink before their silent authority. The laughter of the boys died abruptly, arrogance fading into nervousness, and one of the bikers, tall with a scar across his brow and eyes that burned with unspoken stories, spotted Aisha at once. The red mark on her cheek, the sketchbook on the floor, the trembling in her hands, and he understood without a word what had happened. His fists tightening as he exchanged glances with his brothers, each of them nodding in unison, a pact formed in silence. And though not a single person in the cafe dared move, everyone knew the air was about to crack open with something unforgettable. Because justice sometimes enters not with law or order, but with raw humanity. And in that roadside cafe on that evening, 3 boys who thought themselves untouchable were about to discover that cruelty has a price, and dignity, even when trampled, can rise again with thunderous force. For the engines outside were not just machines, they were heralds of retribution. And as the leader of the bikers took a step forward, placing Aisha's sketchbook gently back on her table before turning his gaze toward the boys, the entire cafe sat frozen between fear and awe, waiting, listening, knowing deep inside that this was not the end but the beginning of a storm. And as chapter 1 closes, with the air thick with tension and the silence louder than the roar of the bikes outside, the story promises that what comes next will not just be retaliation but revelation, for kindness wears many faces, And sometimes it comes wrapped in leather jackets and riding boots, carrying not only power but also compassion. And if you've followed this far, if your heart beat faster as the bikers entered and the cafe went silent, then don't miss what happens next, because Chapter 2 will take you deeper into the fire. And to stay with this journey of courage, justice, and unexpected brotherhood, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive, stories that remind us that even in the darkest moments, light can ride in and change everything.